Hello, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martijn Lofvers. I'm the Chief Trendwatcher of Supply Chain Media. I'm also the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement, a quarterly magazine and a bi-weekly newsletter, and a huge, fastly growing LinkedIn group. And last but not least, I'm also the architect of the SCM IT Subway Map. And I will be the moderator of the next hour. We have a live webinar, and we'll talk about supply chain network design. And we have two experts to answer all your questions. So let me introduce them both to you. So on the left, you see me. This is Martijn Lofvers, like I said. In the middle, Aditya. Aditya, welcome.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
So briefly about yourself. What can you tell you about your background? So
yeah,
what's
sure.
your role?
Hi, everyone. My name is Aditya, and I work at AIMMS as a supply chain consultant, and I have a background in industrial engineering, and I do a lot of work with the customers in different industries, just evaluating and interacting with them and helping them deliver value to their supply chain network designs.
Okay. Thanks. Emily, welcome.
Hi.
Can you introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, I'm Emily. I'm also a supply chain consultant for AIMMS. I work both with prospective customers and existing customers to help them understand what the tool can do for them and how they can get value immediately and in the long term. I've been doing that role for 1 year today, but previously I've been in the network design space for 12 years. So I've seen companies get started in network design many times.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that later. A few practical things. So this webinar will be recorded. The PDF will be made available afterwards. And the whole audience, a lot of you, are on mute, but there's a way to interact with us. So on the right-hand side, you see the chat functionality. So you can chat with each other, but I won't track it. But I will track the Q&A function. That's the one below. If you have questions to Emily or Aditya, please use the question functionality on the right-hand side. So if the lines of questions are relating to the conversation I will be having with Emily and Aditya, I will ask these questions immediately. If not, I will reserve the questions at the end. So there's it will be interactive. So there's a way to interact with Emily and Aditya. So and afterwards, if you have more questions to Aditya or Emily, we will be there in the lounge 30 minutes afterwards, so you can sit down with us and have a further conversation with us. So as of now, I will put off my camera so you can enlarge your screen and you have a better view of the slides. All right. So why do we talk about supply chain network design? So as we have seen in the last 4 years, we have seen a lot of black swans. We have seen COVID with lockdowns, shortages, bullwhip effects, recession. You see it right here, leading to a recession possibly. And of course, the war in Ukraine. And last October, the Gaza conflict started out with the consequences in the Red Sea, also rising costs. And for a lot of companies, CSRD is a black swan. They think they are not impacted because they are not publicly companies. But lo and behold, you know, they are maybe tier 1 or tier 2 or logistics service provider, and they will be impacted in the next 2 years. So 55,000 companies in Europe will be impacted by CSRD in the next years. So, and it has all to do with supply chain. What does this slide say? Basically, since the start of COVID, we have seen a lot of volatility both on the demand side and on the supply side. And as a result, you see a lot of companies, looking at their networks, talk about friendshoring, nearshoring, reshoring. And of course, we have seen Brexit with all kinds of consequences. So basically, a lot of companies are talking about their network, supply chain network design. Early this month, the CFO of Under Armour mentioned in a financial earnings call that they have to restructure and they have to redesign their whole network. So it is on the top of mind of board of directors. So supply chain network design is here to stay, and it's getting hotter and hotter. About AIMMS, so like I mentioned, I'm the architect of the SCM IT Subway Map. So I've mapped out all the major players, software vendors in Europe. You've seen it on ERP, WMS, and TMS. And they are all there, and this reflects the expertise and the proven implementations of all these parties. And as you see, AIMMS has a broader range, and they started out in network design, but also have created SNOP solutions. So they are doing more than just network design, and this is a reflection of AIMMS. But Emily, maybe you can tell me more about AIMMS from your side.
Yes, of course. So AIMMS was created by a university professor 35 years ago with the express objective of allowing mathematical optimization to be used to make better business decisions. So that's been our focus for 35 years. And we've got quite a name in optimization, both in business and in universities, and now recognized by Gartner for the contributions we can make to supply chain planning. We're a global company with offices in 3 continents. And to give you an idea of the scale of our applications, there are more than 2,000 different applications in use by our customers. And typically we see one optimization solve every 3 minutes. So there's a lot of optimization going on out there.
Yeah. No, I know in the past companies were optimizing the network or looking at it every 5 years, but now they have to do it more frequently because of all the turbulence in the world.
Absolutely, a lot of the risks and black swans you've mentioned, and the rising demands on companies does mean a lot more optimization is needed to make the right changes as the world changes around you. We've also recently been investing in AI innovation to make network design easier to use and more proactive. And we have very loyal customers who stay with us a long time and are very excited about the levels of support they can get from us.
So by the way, last year, a year ago, with a colleague of yours, we had a webinar about what you are developing in AI to have a better interface within your application, but also scraping external data. So these are the things you are looking at this moment.
Yes, that research program of innovation is ongoing, and we're hoping to release the first of many AI tools very soon.
Okay. Well, we'll discuss it maybe later, but let's dig in the basis, and maybe you can explain what kind of companies you are servicing around the world.
Yes, so this is just to give you a flavor of some of the sorts of companies we work with. You'll see very many well-known brands, and what all these companies have in common is that they all have physical supply chains that are global, large, and very complex. So what we can offer to them is the ability to look for potential improvements while meeting the difficult constraints that the world places on complex businesses like these.
Yeah. And I see companies upstream, way upstream in the chemicals area, in the steel area, but also in the FMCG, and then moving to the business consumer end, also with the retailers. So it's totally upstream to totally downstream, and even logistics service providers are using your network design tool.
Absolutely, yes. They've all got things they could optimize in their network.
Yeah.
And there are surprising commonalities even between very different industries, between problems that are very similar and have similar solutions.
Yeah, I can imagine so. So maybe Aditya, to get back to the basics, can you explain first what is supply chain network design, and then we dig deeper?
Yeah, sure. So supply chain network design is the process of configuring your supply chains to optimize the flow of goods and services, like, starting from the suppliers all the way to your customers. So it basically involves making decisions across number of locations, which facilities to you, what your warehousing footprint should be, and how to move goods between this. And then the goal really is to balance cost efficiency, service levels, and also flexibility depending on how the market demand is changing. So in very simple terms, think of it as planning a transportation route. You want to ensure goods move smoothly from point A to point B with minimal delays and cost, while still being able to adapt if conditions change. So effective design would consider different factors like transportation cost, inventory management, lead time, and customer service expectations. So it's a very strategic planning, taking into account all these factors.
And what we see lately, especially because of CSRD, that also this kind of tooling, and probably also yours, will look at carbon emission as a parameter to optimize.
Yes, definitely. So we are also focusing on enabling companies to also take the environmental impact their supply chains have uh, with tracking carbon emissions and then also optimizing on them. So that's also a big use case for many organizations these days.
Okay, so maybe you can explain when supply chain network design can help.
Yeah, sure. So there are many different use cases which you can solve with supply chain network designs. Think of capex decisions like opening new facilities like warehouses, productions, but it could also be mergers and acquisitions. Maybe two companies are merging together, and then they want to superimpose all of their resources, and then they want to find an optimal strategy to do that. So you can do that. Then, given the way trends change very fast these days, customer demand pattern is always changing, and then you want to be prepared for adapting to that demand pattern. So then we are there. And then cost cutting, I think this requires no introduction. This is basically making the supply chains more efficient and utilizing them in a better way. Then footprint decisions, how to allocate different type of resources and what are the different options possible. And then nearshoring, that's a very interesting one because I feel like a lot of companies are now evaluating to bring back manufacturing closer to their countries instead of relying a lot on Far East. So they're actively tracking what would be the best strategy to do that. And then you mentioned, and then we had some discussions around black swans. So disasters is part of that. What if tomorrow a flood happens or a war breaks down? What impact does that have on my network? Which facilities do I lose, and how do I take care of that? Then we have product introductions. Maybe you're launching a new product in a specific geography, and then you need to scale it up. So then you need to make decisions regarding how to scale it up, where to start, and then what facilities to utilize for that. And then inventory strategy is, of course, a big aspect in many supply chains. You need to understand where do you want to stock products and how do you want to utilize them for fulfilling demand. And like we just talked about, tracking carbon emissions and optimizing for the environmental impact. So supply chains also need to be more sustainable. So network design is a good way to work in that direction. And then transportation strategy, because to move from one point to another point, there's just so many different modes available which you can utilize. So which is the best mode to use and how much load should it carry? We can check all of that using network design. And then one common practice of network design really is just running a lot of what if scenarios, to be prepared and running different types of scenarios and then making a decision.
Yeah, about nearshoring, and one thing we found out last year, we did a large study about nearshoring together with the Buck Consultants International. Basically, you see a lot of nearshoring, but also a part of that is decentralization. A lot of companies are opening up warehouses into Europe to be closer to the market, to respond more to the market. And basically, they will lower their inventory levels by that sense. So. Maybe how would you summarize all this?
So I guess one of the key reasons to run these type of scenarios is to really, just free up some more working capital, and that helps you expand further and be in a better financial position.
Okay, cool. So maybe we talked about objective financially and in sustainability. Maybe you can explain a bit more.
Indeed. So I think many people usually think of supply chain network design as only objectives around cost, but in reality, the objectives have evolved, and now it's basically a trade-off between different types of objectives. So I think the cost aspect everyone understands, but then there is also service levels like meeting lead times of customers, ensuring that you're able to fulfill their demand or at least a certain percentage of their demand, and then more and more organizations want to be more sustainable, and then they're reflecting that in their supply chain. So now they're not just looking at the most cost efficient solution, but also a solution in which their network does not emit a lot of carbon emissions. And like we talked about in the beginning, like black swan events are more and more of a concern for different organizations with all the issues that started since COVID and are going on now. So now companies are also checking how much risk their supply chains currently have with all of their assets and how they can make them more resilient and future proof. So they're running different scenarios around that. So basically, to conclude, what I would like to say from this slide is that the network design, supply chain network design at the end of the day is really balancing different objectives and making an optimal trade-off that is good for your organization, good for your customers, good for the environment, and also resilient.
Yeah, what I see, in this context, because of higher inflation, higher interest rates, money is not free anymore. this kind of trade-offs are more tricky nowadays. So you have to find out your optimum, and also how robust is it, and what are your alternatives. So I think that these kind of balancing acts are of all the times, but I think lately, because of the inflation rates and interest rates, are more and more important. Being this kind of important, my question to you, Emily, is what are companies using right now? What are the options?
Yes, okay. So every company is making big decisions about what their network will look like in the future. Everyone is doing network in some way, network design in some way. It's just, is it the right way for their company? So some companies might be taking that decision based on the gut feeling of business leaders, or throwing together a spreadsheet quickly. Others might be investing in network design point solutions, so software that is dedicated to doing network design. Some companies might not want to make those decisions on their own. They might be bringing in some form of consultant, or outsourcing in some way to potentially to their 3PL or an independent consultant. Some executional or ERP software do have bolt-on modules that offer network design. When I've heard of this, I've heard that it can be a bit cumbersome to do network design, which is a very big decision in something that is mostly set up for very granular detailed decisions. So I don't believe that's an ideal solution, but it can be done. And if you have a large number of very bright, very tech-savvy people, you might be able to develop your own network design solutions that are specialized to your business and your industry. So there are a lot of options out there.
Yeah, we discussed it briefly before we started this about 3PLs and 4PLs. I think a lot of 3PL companies, logistics service providers, are sitting on a lot of data, and maybe they want to create this, but I haven't seen it flying. And the real 4PLs are assetless. They don't have their own warehouses to fill or their own lanes to fill, so they're absolutely independent. Maybe they are the ones to do that, and some of them are trying to do that, but it hasn't been flying, although it was a promise 5 to 10 years ago, the 4PL environment. Although some of your clients are in that field.
Yes, absolutely. We do have 3PLs using our software. Some of them are using it the way you described, to design a better network for their existing clients, and prove that they are doing continuous improvement and being a true partner. Some of them are using it to evaluate new business and work out how to cost it competitively, but without doing themselves a disfavor. So there are lots of areas where this sort of software can be useful for a 3PL.
I get a question from the audience. Should supply chain design not also link to ROI, return on investment, and or ROA, return on assets? Emily?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
You should definitely be looking at return on investment of any investment that is needed for the changes you are designing. There are smaller changes that can be made with limited investment, and then there are the really big, shall I change my entire structure of my network? And absolutely, you need to take those decisions wisely based on the investment you will make, as well as the saving or other objective improvements that will result from them.
Yeah, but my point, and Aditya mentioned it, you were freeing up working capital. If you mention freeing working capital, say 100 million or whatever, the whole ROI calculation is useless, because if you can do that, you should do this. So I think that it's a typical supply chain thing to do nitty-gritty ROI calculation, whereas if you can free up a huge amount of working capital, that's the way to sell it to your CFO. So that's my point in that sense. Getting back to what you mentioned about how to do this. So a lot of companies are still using a spreadsheet, as you mentioned. Can you tell us about the pros and cons?
Yep, absolutely. So everyone has Excel. Everyone knows how to use Excel. So the big benefit and the big temptation of using spreadsheet to do your network design is that you don't need to buy software, you don't need to learn how to use it. There's no financial investment up front. But there is a lot of investment of effort if you are going to do it well. You have to create your supply chain structure from scratch with no guidance in the Excel, and then you need to maintain that. If you want to evaluate new options, you usually need to create your entire structure again in another copy of your Excel, and it can become very effort intensive to do well. That said, if your network is not large and doesn't have a great amount of complexity, maybe the change you want to make, you can evaluate a couple of options quickly in Excel and get a good answer. So if the question is simple, it can still be a good fit. If your network is very large, has a lot of different moving parts, a lot of potential synergies, a lot of options to evaluate, you will almost certainly miss opportunities or create impossible situations if you do it in Excel, which can't consider all the opportunities and all the constraints.
You know, and because of the more and more regulations, customs, you know, we get trade wars, etc. I think, you know, these regulations will inhibit your supply chain network to a certain extent, or sometimes a huge extent. So I think that your network seems not large, but maybe it is complex.
Yes, that is very true. You can have small but complex networks, and again, it could be very valuable to have those complexities and those constraints represented and work out how you can work well within those constraints to get the most out of what you've got available.
Yeah. All right, Aditya, can you explain a bit more about the steps, and then we get to you know, also about data and that kind of stuff?
Yes, indeed. So far in my experience, you know, working on network design projects with different customers, I've more or less realized that there are basically 6 key steps. So I'll walk you through them. So the first step is really the analysis phase. So this is even before, you know, you get into any network design tools or any modeling. It's really to understand what do you want to determine. So that's when you really define the scope of your project. You ask, what business questions do I want to answer? So these questions could be where to open new warehouses, how to utilize my production facility, how to expand in a country. So you need to very clearly have your scope designed, and then you know what objectives you want to figure out. After that comes the data phase. So this is where you know, start searching for all of the data which you need for working on this project. So then you would, you know, go to your physical sites like production facilities, warehouses, but also, you know, talk to your finance departments to collect different types of costing data, and maybe figure out other type of constraints that you want to take into account, like transportation rules, carbon emissions, sourcing, etc. So you will collect all of the data. And then once you have your data, that's when you really get into the modeling phase. So that's when you utilize all of your data, and then you use a network design analysis tool to translate all of this data into a model which reflects your supply chain. So you basically create a digital twin of your existing supply chain, and then you can see. And then starts the iterative phase. So that's basically the phase where you know, run different types of scenarios. Once you have your digital phase, digital twin ready, you will run different scenarios to evaluate different types of things. You will run scenarios about cost, about service levels, about greenfield locations, brownfield locations. And then after running these different types of scenarios, then comes the implementation phase. So that's when you know, take the results of these scenarios. Then you probably have discussions with your key stakeholders. You show them what the impact is of each scenario, what investments have to be made, what savings can be determined, and what opportunities it brings. And then once you're happy, then comes the handover phase. That's when you present the answers to your broader team, and then you train others to use the tool. And then based on that, you decide how to act on it and what implementations and changes you would like to make on your supply chain physically. So these are the 6 key steps.
Okay, I got a question for the audience about trade-offs, but I think you will address it a bit later, so bear with me. So maybe first you can talk a bit more about data, the necessary data.
Yeah, sure. So when companies are looking to utilize such tools, they often have a lot of questions around data. Like, data is a big discussion point. So, in our experience working with different customers, we do have some recommendations. And the first thing which I really want to put emphasis on is to really keep it simple, because network design is usually a very strategic study. So, you don't need to have all the nitty gritty details. You don't need to necessarily model each and every single product, but maybe you want to make some type of aggregation on your products. You want to make some type of aggregation on your demand, and you want to keep it simple, and then you want to remove all unnecessary information, like small volumes or like flows that don't really happen. And then sometimes customers can get stuck regarding finding very accurate information, but then it's okay to make some type of assumptions, because like I said in the previous phase, it's a very iterative process. So, sometimes you make some assumptions, you have some data, you run with it, you see what the impact is, and then it gives you information about what other type of data to add. So, just keep it simple and aggregate, and then you are ready to start going.
I got a question for the audience relating to this. Does the tool assist in finding data errors, and does it provide solutions how to solve them to ensure accurate modeling?
Of course. So in our tool, there is like an entire process of data validation. So the tool will check what type of data you have filled, and then it will tell you if something is wrong. It will clearly point it out that in this section, this type of data is missing, or this type of data structure does not make any sense. So it will very clearly guide you as to where the problem is, and then it will give you recommendations of what type of fixture you need to make. So the tool is ensuring that the data which the user is feeding is being verified before they're running the scenarios.
Okay. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about scenarios, because a lot of companies want to run different kind of scenarios for the business.
Of course. So, when you're doing a network design study, it's not just like you run one scenario. You need to run different scenarios to really understand what the impact is, and then to like find the ideal opportunities. So then when you have your data model and you start running scenarios, you want to like run different things, like you want to see what happens if your demand is increasing or decreasing. So basically doing some sensitivity analysis, and then you want to run scenarios regarding specific facilities. Maybe you identified some new locations which you want to open. So then you will run scenarios regarding opening each of these facilities and seeing what happens. Maybe you want to run for other objectives, so not just for cost, but you want to do a multi-objective trade-off. So then you want to make sure that you minimize cost but not exceed your carbon emissions on a specific level, or you want to make sure that your supply chain does not have too much risk. And then you also want to run other types of scenarios regarding how many locations should I have, what mode of transport should I use. So depending on your business case, there's really n number of scenarios that you can run. And then once you have these scenarios, that's when you head to the next phase, which is really the scenario comparison.
Yeah. Just before you go there, yeah, with this, you've answered the question about trade-off. So if you look at the screen, you can click on and off certain criteria, objectives, and you can put a weight factor to it, isn't it?
Indeed. So you can basically translate all of these other objectives onto a monetary criteria. So then you can assign a score. You can like pay a carbon tax, and then you can have a risk and the cost of bearing that risk. So you can basically translate all of these objectives into one monetary objective, or you can optimize for different types of objectives, and then you can find like the boundaries of each of these objectives. So what's the scenario with the lowest carbon emission, what's the scenario with the lowest cost, what's the scenario with the lowest risk, and then you can look at them, you can see the impact, and then using our trade-off analysis features, you can find the optimal sweet spot.
So this is how it looked like.
Yeah, so this is what it would look like once you run different types of scenarios. So maybe you would run one scenario and you minimize the total cost as much as possible, and then the tool will tell you to utilize less facilities and drive longer distances, but then that emits a lot of carbon emission. So then when you run another scenario where you want to actually minimize the carbon emission as much as possible, then maybe the tool will tell you to open more facilities, so you have to drive less. Maybe you can do a trade-off between using fuel trucks and electric trucks, and you can have different cost metrics, and then it will give you a recommendation that actually use these electric trucks because they emit less carbons. So like this, you will basically compare different types of scenarios side by side. You will see like what each scenario does good, what each scenario doesn't do well, and then based on this, you will find an optimal sweet spot from these comparisons, and then you will choose the best ones to implement.
There's a question from the audience about uncertainty. Can you handle uncertainty in this kind of modeling?
Of course, of course. So we have a lot of different types of scenarios which you can run for handling uncertainty. You can run a batch scenario. So we have features to run multiple scenarios where you can have a different uncertain demand, and then you can see what the impact is. And apart from that, we are currently doing some in-house R&D on having more stochasticity into place. So very soon we should also have some new type of features to have other types of uncertainty also into account when running these scenarios.
Okay, and then you get to the final phase of analysis.
Yeah, so that's so once you run different types of scenarios and you have some scenarios which you want to implement, you would do analysis of the results. So you will see how your demand fulfillment is for the different time periods. You will see how the throughput is changing during different parts of the year, because demand is seasonal, and then what your inventory allocation strategy should be. You will see how your financial metrics are performing. Think of the total cost, the total revenue, the profit you're making, how the profit is changing. You will see which customer must be allocated from which facility, where to open a new facility. So there's like different types of results which you will analyze, and then based on these results you will discuss them in your boardrooms with your stakeholders, and then make some key decisions for your supply chain. So you can utilize a tool like this to really get some good insights regarding what you should do.
Yeah, I get some more questions. Some of them will be addressed, in a few minutes. So beware. Emily, there's a lot of talk about supply chain maturity, etc. Can you tell us about something, what the maturity looks like for this kind of environment?
Yes, so we do find a typical journey that a lot of our customers go on looks fairly similar. So typically we find our customers are getting initial value from a first project within the first 3 or 4 months. So they will typically start quite small, have maybe 1, 2, 3 users working on one project to answer one specific business question. And if you've not done network design before, there is often some low-hanging fruit, some big value to be had from optimizing that one area or that one aspect of your business.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you can start getting insights from maybe a week in already, but you're typically answering your first big question at the end of 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
At that stage, the big challenges you're facing are how to find the right data, how to aggregate, how to represent your business correctly. But after that first project, you'll have learned that stuff, you'll be moving on. So you'll almost certainly find that once the business has seen the first success, there will be a lot more demand for these sorts of services to analyze what people can do best in the business. And there will probably be a need to grow your team. You might have a few more people using the software involved in supporting it. And once you've figured out the data challenges, you'll move on to other challenges of how can you get these changes you're suggesting adopted within the business. So you'll be looking at things like stakeholder management, making sure you're talking to the right people about the suggested changes, getting them implemented.
But the interesting point, I see Power BI. A lot of decision makers want to have dashboards, reports, a visualization of the trade-off, and I think that's an interesting aspect of this
Absolutely.
phase.
It can be so valuable not to just visualize it within our tool where the modeler can see it, but to have something that is in the visualized in the way the business expects, and that other stakeholders outside the immediate network design team can interrogate it and understand the changes that are being proposed in their own way. So Power BI or your visualization tool of choice can be linked with our tools, and that's very valuable.
Yeah, I think it's very important to sell it to the CFO or to financial colleagues.
Absolutely.
And in the final phase, how does it look like to run?
So then sort of 18 months, a couple of years down the line, you can build on that success. And once you've done your first few projects and you've standardized both your inputs and your outputs, you can start exploring more direct integration. So instead of filling in Excel to populate a network design tool, the network design tool is pulling directly from your business systems. And that takes away a lot of manual effort from that network design process. So the process is becoming more efficient. The team are answering the important questions much more quickly because they've put in the initial investment in how to do things more efficiently. And typically at this stage, we find people are answering more different types of questions. They might have started just by optimizing cost, but now they start to think about managing risk, optimizing carbon, and creating automatically refreshed digital twins. These sorts of things start to come up as you get more mature.
Yeah. So we did a webinar together with AIMMS and also with Heineken, and Heineken is quite advanced in their use of supply chain network design. So they have created supply chain digital twin, and what we've seen lately, and they express it, and it's also in the latest copy of our supply chain movement quarterly magazine, that they do a lot of shipments between countries now because they see demand changing, because the weather patterns are changing. So basically they are evolving to use this kind of tooling also strategically. And that is quite remarkable. And they are still finding new ways to improve and to optimize and to use this kind of tooling. Also in their SNOP and IBP cycle, they use this kind of tooling to advance their decision making.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and they have a very good example of a customer who is definitely answering a lot of different questions, but in a coordinated way.
Yeah, they have a great team to run all this, and they have also decentralized people who are using it. But maybe you can tell a bit more about how to build the right team to do all this.
Yes, absolutely. Doing network design well is not just about having the right software, although that helps. It's also about having the right team who can do it well. And you will always need a project or team lead who will set the direction for the project, manage the workload and the project and the links outside the team. And that person needs to have a very good knowledge of the business that you are modeling and a vision for change. They obviously also need good management skills and good people skills. But yeah, they will need to go on.
No. If I look at this team, there's a labor shortages and there's a war on talent, especially talent. I think on the model architect kind of role, data scientists, but also supply chain professionals who understand trade-offs on a financial level and sustainability level. So where do you see the need is the highest for what kind of role?
I mean, you need all these people working together, and they are different skills. It would be very unusual to have all of those skills in one person.
Yeah.
So you do need a team, not just one person.
Yeah.
I would see probably right now the model architect skills, that combination of having some data literacy and an analytical mindset together with experience and understanding of how supply chain works is very much in demand right now. It's a very good career to be in. Your skills will always be in demand, and it can be very difficult for businesses to retain them, especially because if they get some success in this role, they're often promoted into something a bit more senior and a bit more responsible.
Yeah, makes sense. So talking about this kind of scarcity and how to get this, there's also an option to outsource it. So it's whether do it yourself or outsource. What is your opinion on that?
If you can get the right team, absolutely do it yourself. There are a lot of benefits from having this capability in-house, built by people who really understand the business from the ground up, and with the ability to refresh the answer when the world changes, as it inevitably will.
Yeah.
And if when you're starting out with network design, you have a team with all those skills I just talked about, you might well want to self-enable, build the competency in-house with only the resources that are available within your organization. If you don't have that competency and those skills all available right away on the word go, there are a lot of different options. You can outsource everything, have a third party do everything for you. You don't need to build the team at all. Or if you have some of the people, or you have all of the people with some of the skills, you can involve a third party to help you with your first project and teach you as you go, so that after that you can be self-enabled and get all the benefits of having an in-house competency a little bit further down the line. Or another option is some of our customers use a data and modeling service. So they have the right skills, but those people don't have the time they want available. So they outsource the heavy lifting to a third party. They will create the models, do the data refresh, create that digital twin, and then people from within the business will do the last value-adding activities of running the scenarios and taking the decisions. AIMMS and our ecosystem of consultant partners support all of those models, and I've seen all of them working with companies.
Yeah. And by the way, Heineken has a huge and a very experienced teams themselves, but they also work together with some partners of yours, and one of them is Ortec in the middle. So can you explain how this partner network is using your kind of tooling? I see different kind of consultancies from the HR, from the merging and acquisitions environment, so different kind of directions they're coming from.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a lot of different types of consultancy who use our software in different ways. And so we have consultants from the Big Four. And if what you want goes beyond network design, if you want someone who will redesign your process, think about your strategy, maybe implement the changes once you've identified them, that might be a good way to go. We have optimization and technical experts. If you want a tool created for you, that might be the way to go. We also have boutique consultancies specializing in supply chain. So if a laser focus on supply chain and experience of how supply chain works is what you need, we have options available. And as you spotted, we have consultancies that specialize in particular industries or particular types of question. So there are a lot of different options to find someone who's right for you.
Yeah, I also get a question in this direction, how to use this kind of tooling for different kind of purposes, design, technical planning, and operation support. I think all these network partners are using it in a different way, so that answers this question to some extent.
Yes, absolutely. So we offer a packaged network design tool that can answer the strategic and the more tactical planning questions. But other AIMMS tools are used often in combination with some of these partners to do much more operational questions as well.
All right, Aditya, can you explain briefly, how to organize all this? So how do you organize support, for example?
Yeah, sure. So basically, you need the right type of team to model. So you need an entire team. It's a team effort. You need an implementation manager, which is going to actively see all the recommendations that you are making, but you also need an operational expert who knows the ins and outs of the business, because they are the ones to whom the network design team will be showing the results, and then they will be the ones who will really be giving insights regarding how the network looks currently. Does the current baseline model make sense, and what type of scenarios to run, because they are the ones who are probably very much in the business directly, and they're guiding the network team. And then you of course need business leadership. You need someone who can really help you with the sponsoring and the steering, because maybe sometimes network design might not get the clear priority which it needs. That's why you need a clear sponsor who will ensure that there are the funds and there are the resources and time and team needed to ensure this. So you really need the right support with the team to make sure that you have successful results.
And how about the frequency? How do you manage all that?
Yeah, so it's usually an active project, and it's an iterative process, but you need the right candidates. Some questions are answered once and then you can leave it that way, but many customers are doing tactical use cases where you need to run models regularly, maybe every quarter, every 6 months, and then there are some cases, like opening a new site. You want to open a new factory, maybe you evaluate it once over a time period of five years, but then maybe you need to change the utilization rate of your warehouses every year. So then maybe every year you do a monthly refresh of your model. So this, again, like I mentioned before, it clearly depends on the business scope and the type of answers that you want. So some customers are running the same models every few months, and other customers are starting new projects on an yearly basis.
And I've seen it also. I don't want to mention the names, but also companies are using in their monthly IBP or SNOP cycle to make some sense where to put their inventory and where to source from, etc. So even on a monthly basis, I've seen this tool of yours being using for SNOP reasons every month.
Yeah, indeed. So we were initially focused very much on strategic network design, but now we have also evolved the tool to have some more tactical use cases, so we can enable monthly decisions regarding how to stock inventory, how to change the customer allocation. So now we have a lot of functionality really helping with making such tactical decisions and supporting SNOP and IBP processes.
Okay, good to know. So maybe can talk about more about structure, how to realize all this.
Yeah, sure. So you can have either a centralized team or a decentralized team, and there are pros and cons to both the things. So if you have a centralized team, you have deeper expertise and modeling, and then you can flex efforts to different areas. But then the challenge around that is that links to business areas will be weaker, and then you need to pull in SME support for each of these projects. And then in case of decentralized, there is a very strong link to the business area, and then modelers learn a lot about the business. They get to know the ins and outs of the industry, the functionality. But then there are some risks in terms of having a small team, and then if one of them leaves, there's a high risk of churn and overload. So at the end of the day, it really depends on the way your organization is set up, the type of project you want. So we don't clearly say what is the right way. It depends, and then as an organization, you should choose the one which works for you. But centralized, decentralized network design projects can be supported by both type of teams.
And what I've seen, not to mention Heineken again, but I will, they have centralized it at first, but they use it for decentralization. So the decentralized operating companies all around the world with their breweries, they can use it in a decentralized way because they have some rules centrally, and then they can also use it decentrally. So basically, this platform will be also be useful to do both, actually.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to get the best of both of these worlds, to have a central team, but who are coordinating some more centralized, decentralized modeling.
Yeah, and you have some strict ruling what you can decide on a decentralized level in your local operating company. So that's the main message over there. Aditya, maybe look at the time. Can you explain a bit more about the supply chain navigator? And because we had some detailed questions in that area.
Yeah, sure. So basically, supply chain network SC Navigator is a supply chain network design application which we have built in-house to really help customers make their network design, model their supply chains, run different scenarios. So basically, everything we have been discussing so far regarding running network design scenarios, all of that is enabled by utilizing supply chain SC Navigator. And the main aim of this tool is really to first create a digital twin of your network, take into account all of your resources like supplier locations, warehousing location, production locations, and all the different types of transportation, and then customer demand, and then run different types of scenarios to really determine an optimal footprint. So like we mentioned, running scenarios around minimizing the cost, running scenarios around carbon emissions, making sure your customers' service levels are met, and really take really see the impact of major decisions like CAPEX decisions before implementing them. And not to get too technical, but essentially, this runs on state-of-the-art mathematical optimization, mathematical modeling, and we have our DNA in optimization for the past 35 years. So we are very confident when it comes to building such type of technologies.
Mm-hmm. I got a question from the audience. Talk about the digital twin. So the question is, to this person, it all seems like mathematical optimization. But my understanding, a digital supply chain twin is using actual data. I don't want to say real time or near real time, but I think things are changing. So how do you manage the dynamic kind of data of the month you see happening, and how to use it in this kind of shape?
Indeed. So that's a very good question, and I would like to again bring back to the conversation I had regarding whether you want to do a strategic use case or a tactical use case. Because when you're doing a strategic use case, your data is more or less going to be stable for, you know, the long term, you know, the next 5 years, and then you don't need to make that many refreshes. In that case, you're not going to regularly update the model. But in case you want to do really tactical use cases where maybe you need to keep updating data every month or every quarter, in that case, you know, we do have some features like integration of databases and automatically pushing data, and then, you know, with a few clicks of a button, you know, you can have new data sets with updated data. And then we have some scenario running capabilities where you can run the same 5-6 scenarios which you run all the time with the new data, and then you can be prepared to make the decisions that you want to make. So we have some good ways of supporting that and making sure you can regularly keep updating your models faster.
So in the past, it took ages to run a scenario. So how long will it take to run a scenario in this case?
Yeah, so in this case, like, you know, if you have the data already, then all you have to do is open the tool and configure it. So, you know, you could easily run a scenario within five minutes if you already have the data set up, you know, and then you could run multiple scenarios in 2-3 minutes, making the changes you want to make and then seeing the impact that you want to make.
So you know, not to be commercially too savvy, but maybe you can explain why Supply Chain Navigator is a good tool.
Yeah, indeed. So there are some ways in which we like to stand out from other vendors in the market. So for us, you know, good customer service and good customer support is vital. So that's why, you know, we make sure that for you as an organization, there is always a dedicated point of contact available, you know, during the entire implementation process, the onboarding process. But then even later, you know, when you need to ask something, you need help, we are there for you, and we will regularly keep updating you with all of our latest features. And I think I already mentioned this before, but again, you know, we have 35 years of optimization experts. You know, we still have some of our early employees who are there since the company started. So, you know, we have a lot of knowledge in-house. We are very confident in this, and, you know, this is really our DNA. So you know, we are the right we can create the right type of technology to support this. And then for us, you know, ease of use is very important. It's very important for us, you know, that you have a quick time to value. You know, the way the modeling structure works, it's not complex. You know, there is no advanced coding or operations research or mathematical modeling skills needed. As long as you have some basic supply chain management skills and you understand how to use Excel, then you can very easily learn. So, you know, our time to value is really vital. You can make scenarios really quickly, and then using the different types of functionality, you can run different types of scenarios, and you can really very clearly see the impact. So that's how we like to stand out, you know, using a SC Navigator.
Okay, and maybe, you know, talk about the timeline. Maybe you can explain a bit more what are the timeline for this kind of project.
Sure. So, you know, once an organization decides to implement a technology like this is what a typical timeline looks like via our onboarding plan. You know, so we take like a day or two to have a technical implementation, and then the fun begins. So we start by having a 1-week onboarding workshop, which we always do on site. So we travel to our customers, and then, you know, we do a training session for a week where we talk to you about all the different features this technology has. We discuss with you what your use case is, and we discuss with you what your timeline is, what the priorities are for your business. We make some important stakeholder meetings to give you the assurance that we are there for you in your success. And I'm also very happy to say that sometimes customers are already running their first initial models within a week of this workshops. You know, we also help you create your first model. And after that, we have a standard 3-month onboarding program where, you know, we're connecting with you on a weekly, bi-weekly meetings, you know, as per your needs, where we are coaching you, where we answer all your questions, we give you ideas and inspirations for the business you're working in, and we make sure that you're able to achieve what you want to achieve. And then what I have noticed in my experience is that usually within a month or two, the users themselves are able to understand how the software works. You know, they're able to really quickly adapt to different ways of running scenarios, of collecting the data, of modeling the data. And then they tell us that they don't really need such a regular connect. And then after that, we basically switch to on-demand support, where customers can themselves contact us, and then we will be there for them when they have any specific questions or need any type of help or need to discuss with us how to run their project. So this is briefly what our onboarding program looks like for customers.
And one thing I would like to mention is, you know, you have a very active community of users also exchanging all kind of ideas and use cases among each other. So that's also something to notice. You know, I got a question about, you know, what are the the key 5 things supply chain consultants should be knowing about network design before recommendation to client for network design. So, you know, it's interesting to see, you know, I created this ecosystem visualization 2 years ago. Basically, you should visualize your whole ecosystem. It's kind of like a stakeholder mapping, but in a more structured way, from the upper left side where you start with raw materials to the lower right side where you have your demand and the segmentation, and you have all kind of supporting parties like banks, insurers, sales data, etc. So my take on this, and maybe that's an answer to the question from the audience, you know, what should the supply chain consultant know about network design? You know, first, you should visualize your whole ecosystem with all the stakeholders and all the flows. So basically, you know, what are the strategic flows of goods? What are the financial flows, data flows, even, you know, consumers going to shops or not, people, you can also show flows of people. So I think that this visualization of your ecosystem is essential in network design, especially when the world is changing rapidly. And then you get to the next phase. As a supply chain consultant, you should point out, if you have visualized the ecosystem, where are possible disruptions to be expected, and where do you find synergies? So Emily, if you look at this visualization of an ecosystem, and this is household products, but this is very well recognizable to all of us. What do you think as this kind of notion of to visualize all this?
Absolutely. I think this is a really good starting point for a network design exercise, and it challenges companies not to just think about their own network and the things they own, but the risks and opportunities that can come from people that they work with that affects their operations. So
I hope this answer, you know, I've probably mentioned more than 5 things, but you know, you can disseminate this yourself. Okay, thanks for now. So we have a few questions left, and we have a few minutes left. So one of the questions is, you know, what kind of data do you need? Do you need all the specific data about warehousing costs, etc., to start with? So to what level do you be complete to start with all this? Emily?
So I think that very much depends on what the question is. The one thing you always need is some form of demand. How much product do you need to supply to customers, and where and when? You can never do network design without that. But then at what level of detail you need costs very much depends on what the question you're asking, what things you're contemplating changing. So, for example, if your question is, what should my warehouse footprint look like? It's very important to have all the costs of both variable and fixed costs of warehouses. But if you're not contemplating changing that, if your questions are more around using production efficiency, maybe you can leave out the warehouse costs and focus on getting very detailed costs about costs on production lines and efficiencies on production lines. So you definitely need some data, but you don't need all the data for all the questions you could possibly be asking.
No, it depends on the purpose. Another question, do you incorporate multi-echelon inventory optimization?
So that would typically be a separate analysis. It's too many moving parts to optimize your inventory at the same time as changing the structure of your network. But with an iterative process, we can support that sort of inventory strategy type of question of, should you hold things centrally? Should you hold it closer to the customer?
And it also depends how you design your network. Is a warehouse one entity, or do you have different inventory levels, stock parts within this entity? That's also how you can design it, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
All right. Another question, how many scenarios can you run, and how do you evaluate, compare scenarios to determine which is the best approach?
You can run as many scenarios as you can think of. And
but how do you compare all those? Yeah.
Yes. So you can design the scenarios one at a time and specify exactly what you want to see, and then you can load them up next to each other, either on maps or on charts, to compare their costs or their structures. We also have some tools that allow you to generate a lot of different scenarios very quickly and run them in parallel. So for example, if you want to try lots of different demands, there's some tools for that. If you want to look at lots of different risk possibilities, there's a tool for that. Or if you want to try the different balances between different objectives and look at different scenarios that put different weights on cost or service or carbon emissions, again, we have a tool for that that would quickly visualize all of those scenarios on a graph. Yeah. You also have the option to create your own visualizations in something like Power BI, if there's a particular KPI that you want to compare in a particular way.
Yeah. So, and already Aditya mentioned also sensitivity analysis, so that's also in there. All right. So we were running out of time. Actually, we are on the hour. So next, I would like to show that there's an ecosystem visualization available, downloadable. In the middle, you see we have created a checklist for network supply chain network design tooling together with AIMMS, and on the right side you see a deep link to the supply chain navigator. So you find more information in the PDF of this presentation. So, like I mentioned, right after this, Emily and Aditya and myself will be available in the lounge. So if you have further questions, I have more questions, but we are out of time. So if you want to ask these questions directly, you can sit down with us in the next 30 minutes and have a direct conversation, kind of Zoom meeting. We don't bite, so feel free to sit down at the table. So with this, I would like to thank you, Emily. Thank you for your explanation.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And Aditya, also thank you for your explanation and in-depth insights.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having us here.
Yeah. And the audience, thank you for listening in. Thank you for all the questions. And, if you have more questions, feel free to join us in the lounge. Otherwise, thank you for watching. And maybe I will see you again in another Webinar Wednesday in one of the next weeks. Thanks for now, and hope to see you in a Webinar Wednesday or in the lounge. And bye-bye.